Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope we're all having a great weekend so far. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some new palettes that I got at Ulta. We're going to show some swatches and also some comparisons with other things in my collection, just to kind of help you decide whether or not you really need these palettes or if you might already have something similar at home. And all of the palettes in today's video are more affordable or drugstore palettes. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in and take a look. Alright, so the first palette I got is the new Colourpop Melrose palette. This one is currently an Ulta exclusive, but I saw on Instagram that it's going to be available on Colourpop's website in February. So if you're outside the US and you can't order from Ulta, then in February you will be able to get this one. And when I saw this on the Ulta website, it definitely spoke to me as most neutral palettes do. And I initially had thought that it was more of a cool tone color story, but then when I got it home, this happens all the time with Ulta. I feel like their colors on the website are not completely accurate. So when I saw it in person, I noticed that it's really more of a mix of warm and cool tones. You have warm copper and gold and terracotta and warmer browns mixed with some cooler shades like dusty mauve and greens and a beautiful lavender duochrome with a blue flip to it. You also have one pressed glitter in this palette as well. Not my favorite, but at least it's only one shade. And I think overall these colors are pretty standard. I think you probably have them many times over in other palettes, with the exception of that Fairfax shade, which is that lavender with the icy blue flip. That one is gorgeous and a little bit more on the unique side. I wasn't able to replicate that in any of the other palettes I'm going to show you, but let's get into some comparisons because there are a ton of them, and I'm going to try to go through these as quickly as I possibly can. A lot of them are from Colourpop, but the first one is actually one that was bothering me because when I saw this palette, when I swatched it, I kept thinking it's reminding me of something. I couldn't think of what. And then when I posted my swatches on Instagram, a few of you guys said it looks just like the e.l.f. New Classics palette. And I was like, yes, that is the one I was thinking of. So I'll show you that one first. And it's so close. Even though the e.l.f. one has more shades, it's the same exact mix of warm and cool tones, and so many of them are just spot on. I do like Colourpop's formula a little bit more. I like e.l.f.'s eyeshadow formula as well, especially the bigger palettes and then the little mini bite-sized ones. But for some reason, this particular e.l.f. palette, I wasn't too crazy about. I felt like the shimmer shades in particular were a bit lacking. So in this case, I do like Colourpop's formula better, but if you already have the e.l.f. New Classics and you like it, I really don't see any reason to get this one. The only differences I saw were that blue duochrome shade and the pressed glitter, and that's basically the only thing you're missing. Next, I also got some requests to show it next to Soft Glam, and this one I really had my doubts about. I didn't think they looked all that similar when I looked at the palettes side by side, but then when I actually swatched them out, I saw a lot of similarity, especially toward the right-hand side of your screen. I thought there were about 6 or 7 shades that are really, really close. Again, Soft Glam doesn't have that blue or the pressed glitter. It also doesn't have the green, but other than that, there are a lot of shades in common. Next up, we have Boudoir Noir, and that one was more of a recent release from Colourpop around the holiday season, and I thought that some of the greens and the neutrals looked pretty similar with this palette, so I wanted to swatch them side by side. They also both have the pressed glitter, but there actually weren't a lot of dupe shades between the two palettes once I swatched them out. I think that Boudoir looked a little bit deeper looking at the shades in the palette, but in the swatches it's really not. I think they have a very similar mix of both lighter and deeper shades. It could have just been the packaging that was throwing me off with that one. Next up is That's Taupe, and I got a ton of requests for this one as well, and I wasn't so sure because while there are some cooler tones in the e.l.f. Melrose palette, there are also warm ones, and I don't think a lot of people realize that when looking at the palette on Ulta's website, but as it turns out, there was a little bit of overlap between the two. I wouldn't say there's enough to call it a dupe, but if you have That's Taupe already, you might feel like there's enough overlap that you don't necessarily need the Melrose palette. Next up, we have Bare Necessities, and this is another one. It's such a big palette. There's so many neutrals in here. I feel like you could dupe a ton of palettes with just this one, and this time was no different. I was able to find most of the same shades with the exception of the greens towards the right-hand side of your screen. In Bare Necessities, they have gold and bronze, so that's what I paired those with. Also, Bare Necessities doesn't have that blue lavender duochrome, so I paired that one with a taupey silver more towards the left-hand side of your screen. So, I mean, if you have Bare Necessities already, I do think you have most of these shades. And then next we have the Stone Cold Fox palette. I didn't actually swatch these two side by side, but I'll show you just kind of what I was looking at when I held the two palettes up next to each other. And I just didn't think there were enough shades in common to warrant actually swatching them out. I think Bare Necessities was closer because it has that mix of warm and cool, but Stone Cold Fox has mostly the cool tones, and I really didn't see any of the warmer shades in here at all, or the greens, or the blue, or the pressed glitter. So I feel like the shades in common would have been really minimal. I also got a ton of requests to show it next to Flutterby, and that's another one that is very, very cool toned. It's really purple for the most part. And again, photos of this online looked a little bit cooler than it actually is in person. So I think, you know, when you look at them side by side, definitely that dusty pink that's in Off Melrose is close, and maybe one or two of the browns, but that's really all that I could see that these two had in common. So I didn't really bother swatching these either. Also, Wild Nothing is another one that I initially was thinking was going to be close to this, but when I looked at them side by side, the Wild Nothing palette is so light in the top two rows, and the green that's in there is way more pastel. I think the few shades on the bottom might be kind of similar to the Off Melrose, but I just didn't think there were enough to really warrant swatching this one either. I think Wild Nothing is just kind of a way lighter version than Off Melrose. Next up, we have the Colourpop Sandstone palette. This one was a little bit of a gamble for me. It kind of looked like they had some similar shades, but I wasn't positive how it would actually swatch out. And it did pay off in the end because I found quite a few similarities. I wasn't able to find that dusty mauve shade in the Sandstone palette or the blue duochrome, but it does have the greens and it has all those warm neutrals. So I think there's enough overlap between these two that you might feel like you don't necessarily need the Off Melrose palette. Next, we also have the First Disney Princess palette. I got tons of requests for this one as well, and I really didn't see it initially. I thought the Disney one just looks so pink and purple when you look at the palette itself, and in the end I was able to find some neutrals in common, but a lot of the other shades just really didn't line up exactly. So overall, I just think it's way more rosier, while the Melrose one kind of has like that earthy, dusty vibe to it. So definitely not a match to me. So anyway, guys, tons of similar shades with Off Melrose. I'm sure there are plenty more, especially just across all other brands in your collection. So I don't think this one is particularly unique or special. I think probably most of you have at least one of those palettes that I showed. So unless you like this very particular mix of shades, or you really, really want that blue duochrome that I wasn't able to find in any of the other palettes, then this might be worth picking up. But otherwise, I think it's just a very similar color story to what Colourpop has done in the past. Next up, we have the new BH Cosmetics Lunar New Year palette for 2021. When I first saw this on the website, I was immediately attracted to the color story because it's just so beautiful. I just love color. I don't necessarily love wearing colors like this, so it may have been a mistake to purchase this just because I don't really dip into red shades very often, or yellows for that matter. So I don't know, it's kind of a little bit outside my comfort zone, but it's been getting a lot of hype as well, so I did want to show it here on my channel. So this one retails for $21. It has 21 shades, and it contains 11 mattes, 5 shimmers, and 5 pressed glitters, which I actually didn't really notice when I saw it on the website, but yeah, there's 5 pressed glitters in here. Also, it's vegan, so you won't find carmine in any of these red shades, but 7 of the shades in the palette are listed on the back as pressed pigments that are not for use in the immediate eye area in the United States. I know in other countries that's not really an issue, so it's really up to you guys whether or not you feel comfortable using them around your eyes, but there are quite a few in here. Also, the glitters on the back are listed as face and body glitters, and they say not to put them in the eye area as well. So that definitely makes this palette a little bit more limiting. Now, I will say the formula on this is fantastic. BH Cosmetics has come such a long way with their formula. I think it's beautiful. The matte shades are incredibly pigmented and very, very smooth. The shimmers are super buttery and beautiful and smooth as well. You know, the glitters, obviously I haven't tried on my eyes, but they are gorgeous as well. If you love glitters, I think they're just so multi-dimensional. They're stunning, but at the same time, this palette definitely has its drawbacks, like I mentioned. So I want to show you guys a couple of alternatives. The first one is the one I immediately thought of when I first saw this, and that is the Cosmetics Picante palette. And this one, I just thought it looked so similar because it has that warm and spicy vibe and even has the same layout and packaging. But the Picante color story I like a little bit better. I'm not into the glitters and the bright shades in the BH, and the Picante just feels more wearable to me. And also it has these really pretty purple shades mixed in. I did find quite a few colors in common in both palettes. No greens or glittery shades in the Picante palette, but I really like that version a lot better. So it's just one thing to keep in mind if you're more like me and you kind of want this vibe, but you don't wear glitters or really bright shades. Next up is a palette that I don't have, but when I saw this, I also thought of it as well. It's by Morphe and it's the Fierce by Nature palette. This one, again, looks really, really similar. I'm not a fan of Morphe's formula. I think BH definitely has the edge with that one. And also the Morphe palette looks like it has way more shades, but also a ton of repeat colors. I feel like they just have the same colors over and over again in that one. So while I think it could be a dupe and especially an option if you don't want the pressed glitters in here, I think you'll probably get a better formula with BH. But if you already have the Morphe palette, then you may not necessarily feel like you need to run right out and buy this one either. Another one I thought of is the Ace Beauté Quintessential palette. And this one doesn't have greens or glitters and it does have a blue, but a lot of the other shades look really, really close. The neutrals in particular are almost spot on, and some of them would look really similar on the eyes if they're not. And Ace has a beautiful formula. If you like these rich and bold colors, it might be one to check out again as an alternative to the BH Cosmetics one because you have a little bit more color variety and no glitters as well. All right, so then next up we have the BH Cosmetics Lost in Los Angeles palette. I love these travel palettes. I collect them. I think, again, formula-wise, absolutely beautiful. I wasn't quite sure about this one though because it has these more pastel colors, and in general, as a rule, anytime I've purchased colors like this, they don't always swatch well or they could be a little bit more on the chalky side. This one was not chalky at all. It's an awesome formula. These are so rich and pigmented. The mattes are really smooth. The shimmers are really creamy. It's just BH's classic formula with nothing different, even though you do have these more pastel colors. And it's just a really nice range of color to make a lot of different types of looks with. It screams springtime and summertime to me. So if you like colors like this, I don't think you'll be let down with the formula at all. But that being said, you may have a couple of things in your collection already that are really similar. The first one I thought of was the BH Cosmetics Hangin' in Hawaii palette. This is another kind of summery themed one that they did as part of the travel collection way back when they first started this. And they don't look exactly alike, but they do have that similar kind of bright summery theme going on. And I love the duochromes in the Hawaii palette. I think they are so beautiful, the ones towards the right-hand side of your screen. The matte shades in the Hawaii, though, on the left side of your screen are a little bit deeper, while the LA one is more pastel and kind of lighter overall. I don't think there's really a lot of overlap between these two, even though I kind of thought there was going to be. Next, we also have the Juvia's Place Douce palette, and this is another one that I have in my collection that I thought would be kind of similar. It is a smaller palette, but it does have a lot of the same shades, or at least it looked like it. I didn't really end up finding matches other than that shimmery light pink, which is kind of close, but this one looked a lot more similar in the pan than it actually did when I went to swatch it. The next few are ones that I don't actually own in my collection, but also thought they'd look kind of similar. The first one is the Colourpop Candyland palette. This one, while not exact, I think it does kind of line up a little bit. It doesn't have the deeper blue, purple, or green, but some of the lighter shades I think look really, really similar to each other. Another one is the Makeup Revolution Roxi palette. This one too has almost the same vibe. It has the same kind of tones in it. They're not quite pastels, but they're not brights either. And I think, you know, again, it has that blue, the purple, the greens, the pinks. These two look very, very close to each other. And then we also have the Glamlight Ice Cream palette. The Glamlight one is way larger, but it does seem to have a lot of the same kinds of shades going on and a really similar color story overall. I do really love Glamlight's formula. I think it's fantastic. So that's just another one that if you already have, you probably have a lot of the same colors in your collection. And then last but not least, we have some new palettes from Makeup Revolution. It's their Ultimate Nudes collection. When I saw these, I immediately thought of Huda Beauty's Nude Obsessions, and I know those have been out for a while and it kind of seems late to be duping those, but I can't think of other brands that have actually duped these yet. I remember getting so many requests to find dupe dupes for these back when they launched, and I had so much trouble because the typical dupe brands like Alter Ego and C Color, none of them actually ended up duping these. So I don't know if there are some solid dupes out there, but I wanted to take a look at these just to see how similar they would be. So let's take a quick look up close. First, we have the light option. It has those really beautiful light purples and pinks for lighter skin tones. Then we have the medium option, and this one just goes a little bit deeper. It's very warm toned overall. It has a nice mix again of neutrals, but you also have a little bit of pink in there. And then the third one is the dark option, and this one has very rosy tones. Again, it's really warm for the most part and a lot deeper and richer than the other two. So I was really curious to see how these stacked up next to Huda, because I know Makeup Revolution's eyeshadow formula for me can be very hit or miss. There have been a few palettes over the years that I've liked from them, but then a lot of misses and things that are very powdery. So I'm actually wearing the light palette on my eyes today. I decided to try this one versus like the ABH Cosmetics and the Colourpop because I think their formulas are very consistent across the board. But I was really curious to see how these performed on the eyes versus just swatching them. And I mean, I thought it did okay. I thought the matte shades were very soft and they blended really nicely. I think they did have to be built up a little bit just to get the color to show up more intensely, but they did adhere to my skin very nicely. I didn't think they were overly powdery. They didn't blend away. So I was pleasantly surprised by the mattes in here. I think they're just a little bit more on the sheer side. And then the shimmer shades also had a really nice creamy buttery feel. So I was pretty happy with those as well. I wouldn't necessarily say these are as good as the Huda ones by any means, but I was definitely able to make them work without too much effort. So let's go ahead and take a look at these side by side with the Huda palettes, starting with the lighter one. And I was actually surprised that these are not exact shade for shade dupes. I thought that they were, but then when I pulled out the Huda ones, I noticed that there is definitely a little bit of difference here. So with the lighter one, there's definitely some color variation, particularly with the shimmer shades, although the matte shades are slightly off from each other as well. And when I swatched these two, you can see with the Huda swatches along the top, I think that the shimmer shades in particular really stand out as being just more shiny, more foiled. I think the ones in the Makeup Revolution palette just really don't compare. Swatching the matte shades, I think both of them felt pretty smooth, and the Huda one was definitely a little bit more pigmented. I felt like I had to build up the Revolution ones just a little. But color story wise, I think these are close, but definitely not exact shade for shade dupes. Next up, we have the Revolution medium next to the Huda medium. And these also, I saw a difference in right away. The Huda one has a little bit more color variety going on because it has the gold and the rich copper, and the Makeup Revolution one is a little bit more on the neutral side. And I think the colors look a little more close to one another. And again, swatched out, you can see the Huda just has more pigmentation going on. I think the mattes look more pigmented. The shimmer shades also are way more shiny and foiled again. There was a little bit of patchiness going on with the ones from Makeup Revolution. And just like with the light palette, I do think that the mattes are more similar than the shimmer shades in these palettes as well. And then last but not least, let's take a look at Huda's deep versus Makeup Revolution's dark. And these two, I do think, again, they have a similar vibe, but they didn't dupe them exactly shade for shade. And looking at the swatches, I think this one is probably the closest to the original as far as the colors go. The mattes are almost all spot on, and even the shimmer shades, I really see only two of them that aren't really close. The other two I think are. So I think if you're looking for one that has the colors closest to the Huda palette, it would definitely be the dark one. So overall, if you like the vibe of the Huda palette and you're not necessarily looking for an exact shade for shade dupe, I think that these are okay. I don't think they're my favorite formula, but they were pretty easy to work with, and also they're very inexpensive versions of the Huda palettes. So if you wanted to play with similar types of colors, then I think these could potentially be an option. All right, guys, so anyway, those are the new palettes I picked up from Ulta and some comparisons. Hopefully they were helpful in helping you decide whether or not to purchase these new palettes or maybe to skip them. So I'd love to hear your comments down down below if you've actually bought any of these yet, or if you were planning to, or if you've changed your mind. I always love hearing your thoughts. And also thank you so much, as always, for taking time out of your Sunday to spend it here with me on my channel. I appreciate it so much. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you like eyeshadow palette comparisons and makeup reviews, definitely hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all in my next video. Take care. Bye.